this is a big thing. At that time, I had an extreme phobia of public speaking. Like,
oh, wow.
Every time, yeah, it's a complete.
And sorry, just to stop there, because Gordon
I
is,
know,
if not one of the best speakers on the circuit, which me and him did a lot in Dubai. He's an incredibly engaging, funny, and just awesome sort of presenter and head of the show. So how did you get from sort of one side to the other?
Actually, you know what? I think it'd be good for your audience to understand, because maybe someone in the audience can relate to this.
Sure.
So when I'm gonna be vulnerable. When I grew up, rough family situation. I had a stutter, a speech impediment. It was probably psychological, to be honest, not necessarily physical. And every time that I had to speak in front of a group, I always felt there was intense hostility from that group. Like I was a weird one. I couldn't speak, adrenaline dump. It was just terrible. And actually, there's one time I was in the Boy Scouts. I got in front of the whole group to give a presentation of a badge to someone else, and I just completely stuttered. I couldn't do it. And I remember like this room full of adults staring at me. And it was just like all this trauma associated with public speaking, just terrible. And when I would do business networking events later as a professional adult, and we go around the room slowly introducing ourselves, as it got closer to my turn to introduce myself, my blood pressure would go up. It was just massively bad. And what I did to address this in part early on is I started to host social events. I had something called Happy Hour Mafia in Los Angeles. And it was my social hack because, if you attend an event, it's hard to meet people. It was hard to meet people if you were me. But if you host or organize the event, you have a good excuse to talk to everyone. You say like, hey, are you having a good time? So I started that, and I gradually acquired some social skills. This is before I started back practicing law. Now, when I went to Odessa and I discovered blockchain and crypto, and I realized I needed to work to change the law and to work with regulators and to do all this stuff, I was like, I just need to address this personal deficiency. This is a weakness that's been with me for generations, longer than I think a lot of your listeners were alive. And I was like, I just got to kill this. I got to kill it. I got to kill it now. So I put myself in every public speaking opportunity I could. And it was terrible in the beginning with my heart, beating and everything else, and sweats and stutters and nervousness. And I would prepare for days and get on stage and, eke it by. And then I guess a couple of things happened. Number one, it's like when I desensitized me to the fear by just being on stage. Okay. And I got more social, and suddenly it shifted from terrible fear to like roller coaster fear. When you're on a roller coaster and you're safe, but they're like, there's a simulation of danger. So it's like a fun kind of adrenaline. Sure. I suddenly switched to that. And all of a sudden I was like, wow, I like being on stage. And then I decided, I may or may not be smart, but there's a man in my mouth who says things who's very smart. So, okay, I don't like half the stuff that comes out of my mouth. I swear there's a little man in my mouth who's like got a PhD in law and science and everything in history and economics. And then after it comes out of my mouth, I'm like, oh, that was smart. So I learned to trust the little man who lives in my mouth and just let him talk.
That's awesome.
I know that sounds funny. And what also happened is I re-examined my prior relation to law. And I realized I was looking at it from a childlike perspective of like the mean adults picking on, bullying me, the innocent kid. It was a juvenile point of view. And it was the same, the reason I was afraid of going to court at that time was like, I had this juvenile idea of like, these are the adults who know what they're doing, and I'm just some kid who's gonna get yelled at. What happened is I started doing deals, and I started going up against other lawyers, and I started to realize that they were wrong often, or full of it, or lying.
How so?
Some lawyer was blustering on something, and I'm like, that's not what the contract says. The contract says this.
Sure.
He's like, what? And instead of admitting he's wrong, he's trying to cover it. I'm like, you're lying. It's like, and my justice-oriented brain, once I realized that people are just being jerks and don't really know what they're talking about, a lot of them. We'll talk about regulators in a minute. And it's like then I guess my adrenaline, before my fight or flight, before my flight response was kicking in. But I'm like, look, I'm 6'2.5". I'm bigger than you are. I do jujitsu. My mouth works. I know the law. Who do you think you are?
You got nothing to be scared of.
It's like, I will intellectually crush you
Yeah.
if you come after my client this way, and I'm going to do it in public in a way that's going to destroy your reputation. You are wrong, opposing counsel. Okay. You know, like, don't mess with my client. And it's like, you know, and they'll try to stare at me. I'm like, are you on drugs? It's like you can't physically hurt me. Believe me, don't even try. You know, if you're in the audience watching this and you have nervousness about public speaking or about social interaction, don't be afraid. Everyone does. I'm like an extreme case. Just gradually push yourself. Like I'm pushing my fiance, and she's really taken to it. Okay, and you know, it's fantastic to see. You can't influence people at scale unless you either A, write, or B, speak. You got, if you care about changing the world, you need to do one, the other, or both. Ideally, both. So if you're watching this, just take it from me. I didn't expect the conversation to go this way, but I'm just telling you. If you're watching this and you're a little nervous about speaking, or you're an introvert, I'm an introvert also. Okay, you know, my native default mode is I like reading and just being alone. But if you want to change the world, it's good to learn these skills, and you have nothing to be afraid of. So just push. So okay, public service announcement is over. What was the question?